It is Friday, May 22nd. Let's talk PlayStation. The PlayStation 5 game rumors are not slowing down, and we are so close to this potential June showcase of games. But before we get into all that, we'll start, as always, with our PlayStation Plus reminder. The May games that are currently available: City Skylines and Farming Simulator 2019. You got a little bit of time left. The June titles should be announced relatively soon, and hopefully it's much better than what May had. But to start off, last week we had some Sony financials. Well, coming out of that, we had the Sony corporate strategy meeting where we learned a number of new key details, one of them being PlayStation Now subscriber numbers. It's now updated to 2.2 million. If you remember, for years we always talked about this and how the reason why Sony doesn't disclose the subscriber numbers is because it's probably a very embarrassing number, which it was. It was 700,000. That was over a year ago. Then we got 1 million. That was in October, so about 8 months ago. Now today it's at 2.2 million, so very aggressive growth like they've said actually. It's about 40 to 50% year-over-year increase, which is very good, and this is our biggest jump so far in the shortest amount of time. So obviously good there, although 2.2 million, still not very good. It's still a very embarrassing number, even given the install base of PS4 and the availability of PS Now. That's something I also see a lot of is, hey, I'd like to try PS Now, but it's not available in my country. Now, even accounting for that, it's still got pretty good coverage in some key markets like North America, right? So the fact that it's just so low is still, not very impressive, although the growth is there, and obviously Sony's going to capitalize on PS Now more and more in the future. That's why they bought Gaikai years ago. That's why they've released PlayStation Now as early as 2014, where some of these other streaming services are just now coming in or coming out of beta phases or just launching, right? So still a key area for Sony, but 2.2 still not all that great, but the growth is there. We also have a metric for remote play activity. This is something we don't hear about too often out of Sony, but of course it's an area that the company is still putting a lot of effort into, especially today now where we're seeing so many devices allowing us to stream to multiple screens. Obviously a big part here. Sony's been doing this for a very long time. Anyway, they mentioned the activity for this in terms of monthly users is 2.5 times higher than, I believe the slide posted December 2018 and December 2019. So kind of a weird metric, and certainly describing it as 2.5 times increased is them masking the true number. So once again, they're probably embarrassed by the true activity number that they don't want to put out there. However, this is still something that Sony wants to play a big role in for not only PS4, but PlayStation 5 down the road. But of course, one of the biggest takeaways from the meeting is Sony Corp President and CEO Kenichiro Yoshida claiming the PS5 lineup is compelling and will be announced soon. He says, games for the PS5 that deliver this new gaming experience are being made by both first and third-party developers, and we plan to introduce a compelling lineup of titles soon. So obviously, we do need to see these games at some point. It's not even really a huge news story. This caught so much attention, but it's like, okay, obviously the company thinks they have a good lineup, and surely we're going to see the games soon because this is the same year that PS5 is launching. But it's still a somewhat slight indication that it could be within, the next few weeks to a month or so, right? And that's what we've been hearing, is that early June will have something like that. Sony has also gone out of their way to explain that their relationship with Microsoft is deepening. Now remember, May last year, actually, so yeah, 1 year ago, we heard about the strategic partnership between Microsoft and Sony, where Sony would be providing semiconductor tech and things like that, whereas Microsoft would be providing cloud services, letting Sony use the Azure tech. But we've also got a quote here from Sony's Executive Vice President, Toru Katsumoto. He says, since last year, we've been discussing this collaboration with Microsoft. In addition to cloud streaming games, there are semiconductors, consumer electronics, and remote solutions. In these areas, we are proceeding with our discussions. Microsoft Azure has splendid cloud technologies, and they have given us a clear explanation so far. Each side has its merits, and it seems that our mutual understanding is deepening after discussions. This really just dials back to PlayStation Now and remote play. These are still big areas for Sony. They were early adopters and getting involved in this technology, and they just want to provide a better customer experience, which I'm all for. PS Now still needs to get that latency down much further. And then finally, we also heard that Jim Ryan has a new title. Well, really, he's taking on more responsibilities in addition to what he currently does, which is President and CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment. He is now also the Senior Executive Vice President of Sony Corporation as a whole. So really just more responsibilities. He's not leaving SIE. This will be effective June 1st. There's really not much to be said here other than this is a common theme with Sony Interactive Entertainment where a lot of the PlayStation guys, a lot of the higher up PlayStation execs actually get promotions or take on larger roles at all of Sony Corporation, which is so interesting that, nowadays, obviously PlayStation is the breadwinner of Sony Corp most quarters. It makes the majority of revenue or sometimes matches other divisions. But for the most part, PlayStation is Sony's breadwinner. So we always see a lot of PlayStation guys actually go into higher roles at Sony Corp where they're overseeing not just PlayStation, but also pictures, movies, the semiconductor stuff, image sensors, Sony Insurance, they have an insurance arm. So obviously having PlayStation guys go into the mothership role at Sony is not a bad thing. Moving on to our next news story, we are less than a month away from The Last of Us Part II, and assuming you still want this game, Sony has announced a limited edition PS4 Pro that will be available day and date, and I think it looks pretty sleek for the most part, right? You got that very heavy embossed image stamped on the top of the machine. There's going to be a DualShock 4 available separately alongside a headset. They've been doing this a lot with their limited edition consoles, so always a good option there if you don't want to shell out the cash for a whole console, especially right next to PlayStation 5. But otherwise, if you're thinking about getting this, you might want to pick it up soon. I'm seeing availability already. You go away for this thing, so and it won't come back. So yeah, you might want to grab it if you see it. But anyway, moving on to our PS5 game rumors. We'll start with this one, Gran Turismo 7. That is right. The company Next Level Racing posted this image on Instagram, showcasing a number of franchises, asking their fans, what are you looking forward to most in 2020? Is it Dirt 5, F1, or the GT logo with a 7 suspiciously on it? So some people are thinking, did they just leak this by accident? This company makes cockpit setups for racing simulators, and they've previously been officially licensed with the Gran Turismo franchise. So some people are, suspecting that this was an accident. Now, the company took down the image, quickly issued a statement claiming they have no direct knowledge of the next entry in the Gran Turismo franchise, and that whoever was responsible for the image, the marketing department or, whoever, they found the logo online that was circulating, and they added it to this image. The problem here is that people can't find the source of this logo, although you could easily argue you just have to find the GT logo and then add a 7 to it. So you could easily just make this image. But this is one of those things, at least for, out of all of Sony's franchises, out of all of Sony's worldwide studios, or PlayStation studios rather, this is the one franchise where it's not a matter of if, it's just when. So with Gran Turismo, Polyphony Digital, Kazunori Yamauchi, they're very candid and very open about this. We know GT7 is coming. It is just a matter of, will it be one of those launch window games? Now, we had a rumor a very long time ago, like a year and a half, 2 years ago. It was one of the earliest ones. It was a Pastebin post, or it was a Reddit post, or possibly 4chan, but it's in the archives of Let's Talk PlayStation. But one of them was that GT7 was pegged as a launch title, which actually sounds very plausible, given that if you look at the timeline of PlayStation Studios, we have to look at what makes sense in terms of what would be ready by PS5's launch, right? Some people are expecting us to see Spider-Man 2. They just shipped Spider-Man 2 years ago, so we might get a tease, but you're certainly not going to get the game launching 2020 or even 2021 for that matter. They might need a little bit of time, who knows? But given the circumstances, Polyphony Digital is lined up to probably have their game ready. They have a lot of assets already built. They've talked about how they have a lot of the stuff actually ready to go for the next entry. The only outlier for the GT franchise was Gran Turismo 5, where it took a very long time to get all this stuff up and running on the cell processor. And that's also why we had GT6 on the PlayStation 3 December 2013 after the PS4 launched. They wanted to get one more PS3 game out there from Polyphony, so they really struggled there, but now that they're up and running on PlayStation 4, they should be good to go here, principally working on the same architecture going into PlayStation 5. Also, GT has a history with, being a benchmark for testing on PlayStation hardware, and we've already heard that there's demos running with the DualSense with a Gran Turismo Sport build, so this all sounds very possible, and it is one of those games where I certainly suspect that it is a very early PlayStation 5 game. If it's not a launch title, it's within the first year in all likelihood. Now, we have another update on the Silent Hill rumor, except it's really more just doubling down on the fact that this game really does exist and that it's really coming and that we will hear an announcement of it within a month or so, and that it's actually playable and that there will be some kind of demonstration slightly after this initial reveal that we're hearing about. So this is coming from Aesthetic Gamer over on Twitter and Recent Era. This is the person that we initially learned about the existence of this game a few months ago. They had claimed that they heard from some friends that Konami was shopping for developers. Then we had the report from Rely on Horror. I mean, we just went over all this stuff on our Tuesday video about all the PS5 rumors that we've heard so far. But this is Aesthetic Gamer once again really clarifying where we sit with this rumor so far. So he released a string of tweets claiming 100% these are the things that he knows and that he's heard. In 2018, Konami shopped with a number of different studios to pitch and fund development for a reboot and an episodic Silent Hill game. In late 2019, a separate close friend in Japan informed me a Silent Hill game was being developed in Japan and that it had started development at the start of 2019. After that, he started to do some more digging. What he had figured out is that it's being developed by Sony Japan Studios, and it will be a PS5 exclusive game. Toyama is directing. Akira Yamaoka is composing. Masahiro Ito is doing the art. Various Siren, Gravity Rush devs, and some others are working on it. This has nothing to do with Kojima or Silent Hills, so that is probably not happening. Sony's not buying the IP. We all know that's ridiculous anyway, so he's right on that. And that the game is not a remake. It's a soft reboot. That's the word that we keep hearing a lot. So to clarify soft reboot, this is actually a good way to put it. It's made so that this can be somebody's first Silent Hill game, which also seems to make a lot of sense given that we haven't had a Silent Hill game in like, what, over 10 years now? So that is basically how he's laying it out so far. So at the very least, we can clarify that the Silent Hills portion of this, where Kojima is involved, and that project could be revived, and that it could be some kind of episodic, cinematic, pick your own kind of path adventure like Until Dawn or something like that. That was the initial rumor alongside the soft reboot. It appears as though that's not happening. So considering these rumors just won't go away, seems pretty indicative that this is probably happening. Now, nothing's 100% of course until it is official, but outside of raw materials leaking for this game or a LinkedIn profile that labels this project coming to PS5, seems like it's actually happening, which this is a big get for Sony. It's a big third-party game, exclusive to PlayStation 5. We haven't had a Silent Hill game in over 10 years, and considering Sony's funding it, you expect the typical Sony treatment like we see from other second-party or Sony's first-party, where they foster incredible talent, they provide these big budgets, and they let this project really flourish. Now, not every single Sony game is a home run, but all the stars are really aligning for this project, and now it's just a matter of seeing the reality of it. Now, we'll go over this next rumor somewhat quickly, but a lot of people are sending me this. There was a recent leak on 4chan claiming that Blue Point's next remake, or remakes, is going to be the Jak and Daxter trilogy, but also Legacy of Kain, and that these games will be announced during the Summer Games Fest throughout the coming months. At some point, this will be announced within there, and so this is not very believable, considering that Blue Point only has about 90 to 100 employees, and this is like 4 games that all would require an immense amount of work, especially the Jak and Daxter franchise. A lot of varied environments, a lot of different enemies. As much as I would love that, this is not happening. It's probably Demon's Souls. I don't know why people are still theorizing what is Blue Point's game, when so far all the evidence, and even Jason Schreier, is more or less telling us it's Demon's Souls. So it's really a matter of, it would be more surprising at this point if it wasn't Demon's Souls. Next up, if you recall, the past few weeks we've been following GamesBeat reporter Jeffrey Grubb, where he's been teasing all these summer gaming events that are going to be coming up, all these next-gen game announcements. Well, the one that we've been eyeing, of course, is that June 4th event that's supposed to have a slate of games out of Sony, where we finally see some announcements out of them. No guarantee of hardware. That could be before, that could be after, but June 4th is what we were looking at. Well, now he's clarified that the event is not guaranteed on June 4th, and that it's currently moving around, but still targeting early June. So not a major departure, not a huge delay or anything like that, but just that the show is evolving a little bit based on what Sony needs to do for that show, which they want to avoid a circumstance where with third-party games, they don't want to have to keep putting up disclaimers that say this is PC footage that's, targeting PS5-like visuals, or it's optimized for PlayStation 5. Basically, if the developer doesn't have a running PlayStation 5 build, then they don't want it to be a part of the show. But I would imagine there's also the circumstance of third parties might just pull out of the show so they can also do something on their own terms. That's the whole point of this Summer Game Fest, is that there's actually a myriad amount of shows that are now taking place because there is no E3, and publishers can now go about doing their announcements their own way, on their own terms, doing their own live streams, their own blog posts. That's what we're expecting throughout all of these summer months. And so for the Sony show at least, it's still early June, but we could see less third party there, which I think most people are actually probably okay with, because sure enough, a lot of people want to see all the Sony announcements. And in terms of the Sony announcements, this is something that we haven't really touched on, except the Gran Turismo bit, but we could see Gran Turismo 7 for first party. Obviously, Guerrilla Games also in the same situation, where their last shipped game was in 2017, and then the Frozen Wilds DLC, which was handled by a smaller team, in 2018. So there's a lot of breathing room for them, where they could definitely have something to show off or be ready to ship day and date when PlayStation 5 launches holiday 2020. We are also expecting Blue Point's game to be a day one title. They don't have as much of an overhead with doing an original IP, right? They're remaking, so there's a little bit of room there for their turnover rate with their games. So based upon what we're hearing, this could be a pretty lengthy show if what we are hearing is true, where Sony's vetting the footage that's being presented and how it's presented. Sounds very much like during Sony's press conferences during E3, where we get 5, 6, 7 minute long gameplay demonstrations, which arguably that's what people want to see. It would be rather upsetting if it was like 15, 20 minutes long, like a state of play, where you might get a lot of announcements, but because it's so quick in succession, it's really just like 2 minutes of a cinematic trailer, then 30 seconds of some kind of teaser, right? Like, we don't really want to see that stuff. That really irks people nowadays. So this might be a pretty big show. Now, Jeff is also claiming that August is where we'll see a state of play, and it will be a standard state of play, but now it will just include PS5 announcements, presumably alongside whatever is coming up for PlayStation 4, PlayStation VR, and possibly it would once again start elaborating on hardware details. So that's an area where once we're like well past July and yes, in August, we are going to get a lot of that stuff, and it will probably be a number of state of plays and PlayStation blog write-up posts. That's what we're expecting more or less. Either way, sounds very exciting, and I cannot wait. For our next news story, John Carmack, the famous video game programmer, recently responded to a fan on Twitter asking, "Do you agree with Tim Sweeney?" We recently talked about his comments on the PlayStation 5's SSD, and he responded stating, "Yes, being able to load GPU formatted data directly into GPU memory from an SSD is a big deal. The only quibble I have with Tim Sweeney Epic's quote is that you can bypass kernel buffers on PC with unbuffered I/O. The GPU driver overhead still dominates." So it's always great to hear from John Carmack. He was the founder of id Software. John Carmack's great. He's a very impartial person in that he doesn't really play favorites. He's actually very open and candid when he talks about programming and the lifestyle of programming. He's a very fascinating dude. There's a reason why he's a very prolific game developer. He's at Oculus now, but he really is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to programming in this industry. So it does bode pretty well that he does agree with Tim Sweeney's sentiment that PlayStation 5's SSD efficiency and the pipeline that Sony has built out really is as efficient as Sony claims it to be. Next up, ever since that Ghost of Tsushima State of Play, Sucker Punch has finally been more open talking about the game and revealing more details than what we saw from that State of Play. So a few things that we learned recently. A lot of optional conversations are present in this world alongside a lot of secret areas, so if that wasn't already pretty evident from the State of Play, you're really going to want to explore. It's really about checking out that environment and seeing what you can discover. All the animals that we saw, including the horse. So this was this was a big one for me. The horse cannot die. Nothing can happen to that horse. So if you find yourself in a sticky situation, the horse runs away because it's scared of that scenario. So you can quell your fears there. But combat, actually. So this was a big concern for a lot of people. I had this concern as well. You know, it's hard to judge gameplay until you really try it out for yourself. So one element that we're learning here is that it appears very easy to kill enemies, but that's very much, you know, the samurai-esque way, right, where you get slashed with a sword. It's gonna take you down pretty good. Not to the sense that this game's completely realistic, but more so that it works both ways, where if you can take out somebody very easily in this game, the same can happen for the main character, Jin. So it's really something where you have to tread lightly in terms of different scenarios that you might find yourself in when playing this game. So I like that touch a lot. I hope that really is something that becomes a major factor when you're approaching this game. In terms of being the samurai or being the ghost and how you want to approach different scenarios, you're not really forced to do both, or you can favor one over the other. It really is about player options, so that's good to hear. And if you remember catching a glimpse of the map from the State of Play, it's confirmed that that's the starting area, and that for that footage it was rather zoomed in, so it does open up much more after that. Creative director Nate Fox has said that this is the biggest open world that Sucker Punch has done so far. If we look back, Second Son wasn't all that large, to be honest, but Infamous 1 and 2 were, I think, a pretty healthy size for the most part. It wasn't massive, but I think it was big enough to serve what that game was going for. So if it's bigger than, those games, I think we're looking at a pretty sizable experience. Now, this next story is pretty crazy and even weirder. It's 100% confirmed. This past week on YouTube, a full playthrough of Gears of War 3 from start to finish was uploaded, and it's running on a PlayStation 3. Gears of War 3, from start to finish, running on a PlayStation 3, uploaded to YouTube. It's still up. It's a full Gears 3 build, and what's even stranger is how this was confirmed, because this footage goes up, a very early build that was pulled from Epic a long time ago, so this is one of the only builds that are really out there, and was supposed to be kept in secrecy, of course. But then we have the series creator, Cliff Bleszinski, respond on Twitter stating that he's 99% sure that this is fake, and he said it could have been a test build, but I doubt it. Then we have Digital Foundry chiming in, actually stating that they have talked to some reliable sources, and they claim that no, it actually is true. But then Kotaku swooped in, speaking directly with Epic Games, and they confirmed that it was a genuine build of Gears of War 3 running on a PS3. It wasn't supposed to be a product to ever actually come out, so this is not some kind of breaking story where Gears 3 was supposed to come to PlayStation and Microsoft did something. Microsoft actually didn't acquire the Gears of War IP until 2014, but that's besides the point. This was supposed to be a test for Unreal Engine 3, so they did Gears of War 3 and also Unreal Tournament 3, which we ended up getting for PlayStation 3 as an actual product. But either way, incredibly fascinating. I love when stuff like this comes out, and this is very much something that happens more often than you think, where engine builds do have to be tested on all these different platforms. So regardless of the product and the potential future of what you're building, you're still building it because you have to test out the engine and all the features of that development kit. So it actually is such a weird story, but I love that this came out. Now it's time to get to none other than Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter. If you would like to win a $10 code, very easy. Follow the link down below. Supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week because I am trying to pay for your games. Those are all the news stories that I want to talk about you all. Our Tuesday video was PS5 rumor roundup, all the big stuff that we've heard so far, all the things that we don't know just yet. Considering we're going to find out all these things very soon if they're true or not, that's our last major, rumor compilation basically. So go check that out. And as always, stay here on Tuesday at 8 a.m. EST for another video, wildcard topic, who knows, but something will be there as always. And that's it. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.